Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I am so excited to welcome Carolyn Wellsfry Cheng to the podcast. Carolyn's currently the director of ABX over at Workday and a big Demandbase customer, so we appreciate that. There she has worked with both sales and marketing teams to develop and scale their award-winning ABM program. Prior to Workday, she spent many years helping B2B companies build and accelerate their demand gen engine. We're super excited to have her and hear her stories about how she's developing and scaling ABM and working across the aisle with sellers and marketers. So welcome to the podcast, Carolyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. We actually love telling this particular story because I think when it comes to sales and marketing alignment, the more positive stories that are out there about collaboration, I think the more everyone sees what the future could look like. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, and putting real customers and real use cases to that story is much more powerful than just dog and pony shows about sales and marketing should talk to each other. Actually hearing how it works every day is super important.
Yeah. So I actually joined Workday when Adaptive Insights was acquired by them 6 years ago. So I had already been at Adaptive for a couple of years at that point. And when we were acquired, we suddenly had a whole new set of problems that we had not anticipated as an organization, in that we as a company were trying to move up market to LE, really owning the LE space. This is 6 years ago. And Workday had a firm footprint there. So part of our need was to find a way to stay out of each other's way as we were pursuing two very different types of solutions. And while we were beginning that sort of integration journey it took us several years to be fully integrated on the back end. So some of it was just a need to help our sellers figure out where to go, where they weren't going to bump into a deal that they weren't going to get paid on because it was maybe something that was already in pipe for a Workday core solution as opposed to the adaptive planning solution that we were selling. When we started with really coming in and looking at our demand funnel. At the time, I was director of demand generation, and I owned everything that was not digital or the website at the time. So digital website was managed elsewhere. I had events and field marketing and webinars, emails, all that kind of more traditional demand. And we looked at what could we do if we were given a grant of a little extra money. Where could we put it that we would drive the most incremental demand? And hands down, without question, I could get more webinar leads that would turn into more MQLs but it wouldn't result in revenue fast enough. The fastest route to revenue for us was to help our sellers identify one extra deal per month.
Wow.
If we could just get our sellers to get one more opportunity in pipe, given all of the funnel metrics and the conversion metrics through the funnel, it would be the largest driver of revenue for marketing without question. So then we had to figure out, oh my God, how are we going to do this? How are we going to help these sellers when we just got acquired by this big company and we don't really know what's going to happen in this next year?
How many sellers did you have at that time? Do you remember approximately?
We were about 500 or 600 employees at the time. I think we probably had about 100, 150 sellers and CSDs, or SDRs, we call them CSDs. So all of those together, that not everybody was hungry, right? We were covering all segments of the buyer's journey, right? SMB through LE. The SMB team was well fed. They had a lot of engagement through our digital channels. I think SMB buyers tend to be a little bit more consumer-like in their buying journey. Most of it's digital. They engage quite late into the journey. But as we were moving into large enterprise, those deals are very different. and the anatomy of how you structure an account and buying groups and all of this, it's so much more nuanced, and you need to be able to have that precision strike. And that's where we were born.
Yeah. So, wow.
Yeah, I was very smart. I hired the smartest guy I could find from Demandbase, actually. We stole him from Demandbase.
Oh, I didn't know that. Look at that. That's good. I'm glad we can share talent and all support each other. That works.
Yeah, Matthew Miller came from Demandbase. He is just such a strong partner for me. I hired him right after the acquisition was announced. And together, we really kind of scrapped together this very, very scrappy, kind of startup-y program that has since evolved into this like world-class program. But it started with some Excel spreadsheets and an early version of Demandbase pre-Engagio acquisition. Like that's how, we would just start by saying, look, here are all your accounts that are, here's the ones that are surging on our keywords and competitor keywords. And here's who's visiting the website. And here's the titles that we have or don't have. Go aim there. See what you can find. And how do we help? And then how do we take the demand gen portion and pour in leads to those very specific targeted accounts where we see the best opportunities so that the CSDs have something to follow up with and outreach for.
Gotcha. So have Adaptive and Workday come together into one integrated marketing team now?
Yes, absolutely.
All running that together. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a few years.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're running all of that and you've moved up market. I mean, I've used Workday at a couple different companies, more on the enterprise side. And so, and I love it. It's actually like my favorite HR solution. And so don't say that across the board, but I do. I love it. And because it had everything. We did, like performance planning, we did compensation, we did recruiting, like everything happened through there, plus just all the things you need on like it was our intranet, like it was where we kept everything that we needed for internal use. So it's a great tool. But I'd love to pick your brain sometime because I think we can right now, is moving up market to your point, like the way you run program enterprise is very different. And to your point on the SMBs who do behave a lot like consumer, I love the cattail, is hello peanut butter, is that they like you can almost do it entirely transactionally digitally, whereas enterprise and marketing can drive almost the entire pipeline. When you go into enterprise, it's a much more, sales is doing a lot of outbounding and so the packaging and the lead and the sort of lead scoring and helping and partnership looks very different with sales for an enterprise audience. I'd love to hear a little bit about what that looks like. So in the world of, the theme of sales and marketing alignment, let's actually start there. And then I want to dig into how you do that specifically for an enterprise audience. Yeah. So about your thoughts on sales and marketing alignment first.
Well, that's a great question. I think for context, the thing that was really important when we were coming in as marketers is we were in that kind of middle ground between our own startup and this large enterprise company who had just acquired us, but retained us as our own business unit. And one of the biggest differences was with Workday sellers, their book of business was generally less than 100 accounts per rep on average. In some cases, a couple of dozen for the very large accounts, where our sellers had hundreds or even thousands of accounts that they needed to swim through. So trying to identify demand when you have half a dozen large enterprise sellers covering the globe, most of them in North America, those are an awful lot of accounts to chug through, especially when you start thinking about account segmentation of those, very, very large, 50,000 employee companies versus that 4,000 employee company, right? Still considered a large enterprise, but not necessarily the same pain points. I think going back to sales and marketing alignment, one of the first things that was really important for us in building that was to simply have empathy for those sellers and what their unique challenges were so that we had some chance of understanding and helping them move through the funnel And a lot of it was simply listening. We found a couple of reps who were hungry and very mature. So they had a territory that maybe wasn't as rich or wasn't as fruitful or was new, but they themselves were seasoned sellers. They had, great technique. They were somewhere between a rule follower, but also a little bit of a cowboy, right? So and they were the ones that would always have like those crazy, they'd have spreadsheets. And this is coming from my data provider, and this is coming from Salesforce, and this is coming from marketing automation, and this, and I'm going to find my thing. So we found those sellers, sat them down and said, okay, we want to try something different. And really it was a three-legged stool. I had a couple people on my team. It was a marketer, a seller, and their CSD. Here's your patch. Every week or two, here's your patch. Here's what's changed. Here's where marketing sees the greatest opportunity for you to build. Yeah, so we would create these little pods where we would have marketers, sellers, and their CSDs together, looking at their territory every week or two, every month, and helping them use the data to determine which accounts to build out and start generating some awareness, which accounts were indicating they were probably a lot closer to a decision cycle. So what are we going to do to get in front of them, right? How are we going to apply some direct mail or some, a little bit more aggressive way of getting through a gatekeeper versus those accounts that are totally not ready to talk to us? Great. Let's just send them an ebook and try and get them to engage with our digital properties or something else, something to move them through the funnel. So that's, I think, where we started, and it grew from there. And the way that we knew it was working is that salespeople showed up to our meetings.
That's always a good sign, for sure.
It was like the number one performance metric, because marketing would say, oh, I want to talk to sales. And they'd invite the whole sales team to their, whatever launch, and like 8 would come.
Right.
Okay, that's great. I'm sure you'll listen to the recording. I'm sure that's going to happen. But ours, they would actually show up, and they'd show up with notes. And they weren't long calls. They were 15, 20 minutes. We just go through really fast. Like, here's where this account is. What about that? Here's what I found this week. And really kind of pulled that together rep by rep so that we could sort of figure out, well, what is a good process? How do we scale this? How do we repeat this? Because this is a very resource intensive. You can't scale human capacity like that. Or at least we couldn't. We didn't have those resources. So that partnership really led us. It established a foundation that is still very, very true to us today, many, many years later, as even the Workday program has evolved and these two programs have merged together.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's exactly right. I always say it's not marketing and sales. It's like marketing humans, like actual people in marketing talking to actual people in sales. It's not this sort of like vague concept of like two functions talking. It's literally like me picking up the phone and calling an actual seller and saying, hey, how can I help you? Like, hey, this account is showing interest. Like, I'm going to warm them up. If you can follow up, I have a contact over there. Like, it's a dance a little bit of like a really one-to-one across that, because I think when we genericize, it seems like, oh, sales doesn't get it. But when it's like my friend John in sales, I have empathy for my friend John in sales. The whole function feels a little bit more vague, maybe.
Yeah, that is exactly how we think about it too. And it really was starting with the people and connecting with the people and not being afraid of not having the answer and saying, I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to figure it out together. We're going to go chase this down. We're going to see what we can do. And simply just listening. I think as marketers, or at least maybe this has been my experience, sometimes marketing it feels a little thankless at times. Like, we're really good at saying, oh, that was a great event, or hey, your download got a bazillion clicks, so good job. And those are lovely, and I always appreciate those. But I think as marketers, it's sometimes hard to connect to the purpose of a company right? When you think about, what is my purpose here? Is it really to send email? And when a marketer can say, actually, my purpose is I drive revenue with sales, it changed for me and my team that actually became the most fun part of our job, because our sellers were so generous with their praise and with their appreciation and with their partnership. And that helped us know that we were making an impact. It was a small impact to start, right? We were talking about maybe a half dozen reps, but those half dozen reps, we knew that they valued our time and our attention. And what ended up happening as we were growing our ABX program is that sales actually became our most vocal advocate. And sales is the one that went to leadership and said, we need more of this. We need more resources on this team. We need more budget on this team. We need more bodies on this team. This thing is working. And one of the
happens, by the way, like that, we should all sort of set as a marketer.
It doesn't happen.
Right, those things don't happen. That's amazing.
It doesn't. And when it does, it's the funnest thing in the world. It makes it so easy to want to go to work every day.
Yeah.
And the one of the crowning achievements of my time here at Workday has been, and this is even like a couple of years ago, one of our sales leaders actually got on a call with our CMO, who was doing a big evaluation of everything, took time out, came and said, listen, the sellers that use Demandbase and work with this team, they're hitting their numbers. And the ones that don't, maybe not. And that they were willing, that we had built up so much trust and partnership that they were willing to go and tell our new leadership how much they appreciated what we were doing. And I've never had it happen before, and I haven't yet had it happen since, but just knowing that was that true sentiment and that feeling of partnership, it's amazing. And it really is the most fun thing that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I told my team I've written posts and articles about this, but I told my team the very first month, I said, my number one goal in being here is to make sales love us. That's my goal. That doesn't mean that I'm doing all bottom of the funnel things that are just doing that last hit of revenue or converting. It means that I'm giving them a brand that they're proud of and proud to represent, that I'm giving them good air cover because of how we show up at events and in PR, that we are giving them the right high quality leads that they can follow up in, that are going to convert to opportunities, that we are giving them the right content they can use to nurture their folks through the cycle, that they know they're in lockstep partnership, that it's not a handoff, it's a handshake that we're doing all throughout this orchestrated sales and marketing process. But it was all with that idea that if sales loves you, you're going to drive revenue together. And as long as everybody's focused on hitting that number together, then you work on it, right? It drives that empathy. It drives that trust. It drives that assumption of good intent that works you all the way through. So there is a his versus hers in any of that, which is a game changer. And to your point, in the joy of going to work every day.
I think about where friction points are in businesses often. And, I've been through many companies in my career. And I think often I have seen some amount, whether it's friction or it's just ignoring each other between that sales and marketing, I give them all these leads and they never call, or marketing, all they're doing is crunching out ebooks and they're not giving me what I need.
Yeah.
That friction causes a bifurcation of the road, and then you go off in opposite directions. And eventually you're so disconnected from each other that something big has to change for you to come back together. And that's really disruptive, as opposed to just saying, you know what, from the beginning, we're going to do better. We're going to connect, we're going to partner in the beginning, and we're going to just carry it right on through.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can it go too far? I think I've heard something that at some point in your career, someone thought perhaps you were spending too much on sales. How does that work?
That was true. I have a problem in this whole open office environment. I've worked on it, but anybody who's worked with me will tell you this is true. And we had just sort of rearranged ourselves. This was pre-pandemic. We were all still going into the office every day. And I sat probably a row away from the CMO. And she went to my boss and said, all Carolyn does all day long, she's just on the phone with sellers. How come she's not out there doing marketing? And my boss looked at her and said, that is marketing. That's actually what she's doing. Let me help you understand how she's connecting those dots.
Well, funny.
And then that sort of opened up her understanding that marketing wasn't just, this output of collateral or campaigns, that sometimes it's boots on the ground. And that was really, that was actually really important because it helped us make a case for why we needed to up-level our platform technology so that we could create more automation so that we could free up marketing resources to do some marketing as opposed to only doing this. Because we did sort of rotate pretty hard into our job is to sit on the phone and, talk to sellers. And so we had to come back and do some actual marketing work in there eventually. But we needed to scale and we needed to figure out what were those processes and what was that data that was going to help us really make those meaningful changes.
Yeah, I always think about this transition you're talking about in order to scale is sort of people first, which y'all are doing on the phone every day, sitting down with 12 sellers and then 20 and then 40 and I assume 100 sellers. At some point you're like, we can't scale that. There's only 8 of us or 12 of us or however many marketers there were. And then you put some process around how do we do this? And then the tech comes. So tell me about the tech journey. I assume that was when you moved into account-based marketing. So how did you use the technology?
We actually owned a competitive product, but because of the way it was implemented, it wasn't going to work for us. And so when Matthew came from Demandbase, he said, hey, I'm just going to set up a little Demandbase account over here. I'm going to get us a little tenant. And that was sort of the beginning of that partnership. Then when we were acquired, Workday was a long-standing partner of Demandbase, so that was a natural fit. But we needed to augment our stack with Engagio. And so we had actually purchased Engagio with Demandbase. And then as soon as we finished our implementation, you acquired them. So then we migrated to Demandbase One and have been a Demandbase One customer since, I think, very, very, very early in that when you integrated those two products. Since then, we've added a lot of additional technology, like we have a landing page technology with follows. We have a lot of data technology that we've pulled all the way through, and for us, it's been part of it is that we have a lot of technology that we could go buy, but instead, what we're trying to do, our intention is to look at our own existing stack and see if we can make do with what we have. Working for a large enterprise company, there are a lot of steps involved when adding technology. It can take up to a year by the time everything goes through a security review and everything, technical review, that it's so hard. So if we can
use what you got and to try to add,
if we can make do with what we have, let's start there and then make a case for why it's insufficient. And then get some partnership with our marketing technology team to go out there and get us something better. But for now, it's, what can we put together? So our focus lately has been less about acquiring new technology and instead acquiring integrations. So how can we integrate more things into Demandbase, which is still used by our sellers and has actually just in about 2 weeks ago, we did a global rollout to all of our CSDs and gave them access to Demandbase. So it's really important that it's integrated with Outreach or ZoomInfo or our own Salesforce, which is then connected to our data lake and connected to Marketo and connected to LinkedIn so that we can receive and push data and accounts through the journey over time.
So you keep saying, I think CSR. I know you said it's the equivalent of an SDR. What does CSR stand for?
A CSD is a corporate sales development.
Corporate sales development. Oh, okay. So it's just same thing.
It's just we changed the
names. Okay.
Workday has to have a different acronym.
Yes. Were your CSDs always part of your ABM implementation, or did you have to fold them in at some point? Like, how did you drive sales adoption of your ABM instance?
So our program really started with that help sales find one more deal, then use marketing to help create engagement in those accounts that are most likely to turn into a new deal. And that was the foundation of our ABM program. So it really grew out of that. And then we actually started with that before we even had an advertising campaign. The advertising campaign came later. We went, oh yeah, we should do some advertising. Let's go develop a campaign. Let's create some landing pages. Okay, let's start actually going through this process. So yeah, they were part of it from day one, and definitely still are. It isn't universally adopted across Workday, but I think the pockets where the need is greatest, where there are the most accounts to get through, and where they need a deep understanding of which accounts are likely to become a happy customer versus which accounts might just buy something but not stay with us. That's been a big...
We're going through that right now, like looking at those guys, looking and saying, okay, we've got these customers who love us, who grow, who advocate for us, who are sticky, and they've integrated their tech stacks. We have all this stuff. And then we have small ones or these transactional ones that'll come in, and it takes as much work to get them in, and then they're out, a year later, and you think, man, how do we optimize for the ones that have a better tendency to be sticky and value the tech and get the most out of the tech that we can help the most? And that's a challenge, because that means you kind of have to bifurcate your personas a bit.
So, for us, we have an additional complexity of we have multiple go-to-market solutions. So we have to identify which ones we target for each one. Because Workday has, the HCM and financial solution as sort of those core offerings, that's great. But if you aren't interested in those things right now, or you're not indicating that you're ready, those are massive implementations, right? Nobody enters into that lightly. But Workday has acquired a number of companies that are really more of those point solutions that, like Adaptive Insights when we were acquired, Vinley is another one, Pecan, they acquired Scout. And those are land and expand opportunities. So how do we get into the office of the CFO with a planning solution that we can then use as a foot in the door to grow into other areas of the business? So for us, when we look at that modeling, we really have to look at it from that multi-buyer perspective and say, okay, this account is interested in one solution, so let's talk to them about one. This account is interested in 3 solutions, so let's talk to them about Workday, because we have all of these solutions and this other, and maybe this account is likely to become a good customer for one of our core offerings, but they're not showing any engagement yet. Their model tells us they look really good. And so those are very different ways that we would approach each one of those offerings.
So what I'm hearing in there, we're going to move a little bit off of ABM, a little bit off of tech and sales, is that you have sort of a gift in solving problems. Because I feel like you're kind of like you getting acquired, you're integrating tech, you're building relationships with sales, you're scaling the process, you're integrating into the technology to make it all work. Like, how does this all work in terms of, as we think about our audience of being some of our up and coming CMOs or people who are leaders who want to have bigger and bigger leadership impact? Tell me about how problem solving fits into your kind of secret sauce.
I think if I were to offer something to upcoming CMOs, it would be to look. Nope, I'm going to back up. There are things I'm really good at. Abstract connections happens to be one of them. There are a lot of things I am not very good at, like replying to emails. It just doesn't happen well.
Details, Carolyn. Don't worry about it.
Right. I have ADHD, and sometimes that I have to channel that into positive behaviors and I just try to have really great people working with me that helps where I lack. And part of it is how, when a CMO finds someone like me, or most of the people actually on my team, who want to just get in there and sort of start digging around and trying to figure, how do we reconnect the pipes to do some cool thing? That takes an enormous amount of trust from a CMO to be willing to step back and go, okay, I'm going to let this pause for a while. I'm going to let this slow down while I reconfigure things. That's a risky move. But if you can find someone in either an operational role or an ABX role or a different role that really can come in and go, this data here connects to this data here, and if we put them together, magic will happen. Those people absolutely exist. They need to be nurtured, though. They need to be given the freedom to break some stuff and see what happens and fail fast and move on. One of the ways that we have done this in my team, I think it was Bill Gates that said, if you want something done, give it to a lazy person. If you want it done well, give it to, because they're like, can I make this faster? Can I just get this off my plate? I've done this 5 times. I'm done. Can I just make an automated process for this? Can I simplify it? And those people are really golden if you can find them.
Interesting. Okay. I never thought if I want to fix something, hire a lazy person. That sounds like a good way to
hire someone who really wants to just, there are people who have great skills that are really excellent at messaging and really great at brand. And those people are very easy to find a home in marketing, right? It's a very natural fit. But I think we think of how do you make abstract connections as something that's more often seen in an engineering function. But there are a lot of us in marketing. I've managed to hire 5 of them. So I'm sure there are lots of them.
I love it. Well, I know that we're running long here, so I appreciate all your time. I have a couple more questions if you're open to it. So first of all, is there anything else you'd love to add that I did not, that we didn't cover today that you think would be great insight or anything for the team beyond whatever we've talked about?
I'll be honest, Kelly, between this and the presentation next week, it's all sort of swimming around in there. And I'm having a hard time pulling on the threads.
So tell us, our listeners, one fun fact about you that maybe they don't know.
I am a quilter. So if you see behind me, all those quilts, I find it to be a very relaxing hobby. I'm actually very involved in our local guild. And for me, it's literally taking something beautiful, cutting it up, and making something different out of it.
Something equally or more beautiful.
Yes, equally or more beautiful by simply rearranging things. And it's something that I can do and have something that's done at the end of the day. And I love it. I have teenagers, and so it makes me happy when I come out of my room on the weekends and they're just, buried under 5 quilts, cold, shivering on the couch, watching whatever trash they're watching on TV, eating whatever junk they're eating. And it's like, oh, good. This hobby I have is something that actually can surround the people that I love with love. And that's a really nice thing of it.
And my mom is a quilter, and I've never watched the actual process. I've seen her squares, all over. And then I've seen her gifted quilts that she's given me as a baby to me when I had my kids as baby blankets, or now she takes my kids t-shirts from their mini sports, their jerseys and stuff, and makes jersey quilts and things for them. And just amazing. But I've never actually seen her assembling and sewing and the whole process. So I'm fascinated by it, but that's amazing. And you're right. I mean, we live in a world where, especially in the world of marketing, where it's ongoing all the time, and there's no sort of period at the end that we're done with that and we move to the next. It's one big flow. So to have something that you get to finish is and check a box is pretty powerful, I think.
Yeah, and what I think is most interesting about it too, I often get the question from my workmates of, how do you have time to do this? This is crazy. How you're a mom and you work full time. And in my work life and in my hobby life, it's the exact same thing. Take whatever I'm doing and break it down into the smallest parts, and then work on that part as long as you can, and then move on to something else. So a lot of it is just, hey, I have a 3-hour QBR. Can I sit here and do a little hand sewing while I'm listening? Something to occupy. I go into these big meetings at work and I always have a little something that I'm doing in my department. They laugh at me all the time.
Well, you probably focus more because otherwise, 3 hour meeting, you're tempted to multitask on work or that deck or that email. But if you're doing something with your hands, you're actually probably laser focused on the content.
I am very, and that's where my neurodivergence, that's one of the ways I manage being like having attention issues is if I can give my eyes something to do, my brain can listen.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I also feel like those kind of hobbies, like my day is booked back to back. So the amount of thinking that happens during the day is limited, right? It's just transactional, like getting through like meeting. And it's about doing. And I feel like in the evenings or whenever, like I have time to, if I'm like painting something or candy crushing or whatever I'm having to do to like mindlessly feel, that's when I get like actual thinking done.
Yeah, that's when the ideas come.
Yeah, that's when the ideas
when you can relax and just sort of let all the flotsam float out and drift.
I love that. I'm gonna have to find a creative hobby. I don't know how long Candy Crush is gonna make it, but I like the idea of quilting or something like that. That's great. Well, awesome. Well, Carolyn, I have loved this chat. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Find you or follow you, where's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm one of the few Wellsfrys there.
Awesome. And full on. Carolyn Wellsfry Cheng, look for her on LinkedIn. I know that people will love to hear more about your story and everything that you're doing at Workday. And we're so grateful for your partnership. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure.